Imagine that one day you found yourself standing before God. In that moment, there is no longer any work you can use as an excuse. There is no busyness you can hide behind. There are no other people left for you to compare yourself with. There is no opportunity to say, someday I'll do it. You are standing before God, and He is looking directly at you. And He asks you just one question. What did you do with what I entrusted to you? Not with what was entrusted to your neighbor. Not with what someone else received. Not with what you wish you had been given, but with exactly what God placed in your hands. Your time, your abilities, your opportunities, the people He sent into your life. And perhaps, in that moment, you will realize for the first time that the most frightening thing was not that you were given too little. The most frightening thing was that you buried what you were given. This is exactly what Jesus tells us about in the parable of the talents in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25. Jesus tells the story of a man who was going on a journey to a distant country. Before leaving, he called his servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to a third 1. And there is an important thought here that is easy to overlook. The master did not give everyone the same amount. Why? Because people are different. Each person has different abilities, different circumstances, different opportunities, and different levels of responsibility. One person may be capable of doing something another person cannot. One may receive extraordinary abilities, while another may possess a quiet and seemingly ordinary gift that no one around them even notices. But the problem begins when a person stops looking at what has been entrusted to them and starts looking at what someone else has received. Imagine someone who has been given 1 talent. He looks at the person who received 5 and begins to think, what can I possibly accomplish? That person has so many more opportunities. They have talent, money, education, connections, and confidence. I have almost nothing. And little by little, that person stops noticing the one thing already in their hands. That is why the parable of Jesus is not really about how much a person has received. It is about what they do with what has been entrusted to them. The first servant received 5 talents and put them to work. He did not sit around waiting for perfect circumstances. He acted, and he gained 5 more talents. The second received 2 and also put them to work. He gained 2 more. But the third did something completely different. He took his 1 talent, dug a hole, and buried his master's property in the ground. At first glance, it may seem as though he was simply being careful. After all, he did not steal anything. He did not waste the money. He did not lose it. He preserved what had been entrusted to him. But this is where the parable becomes especially serious. Sometimes we think that the main goal in life is simply to avoid losing anything. We try to avoid mistakes, avoid risks, avoid criticism, avoid pain, and avoid disappointment. We want to live in such a way that no one can ever say that we failed. And little by little, we can reach a point where we no longer lose anything because we have stopped doing anything at all. The third servant did not use his talent because he was afraid. When the master returned, the servant said to him, "Master, I knew you to be a hard man." And then he explained, "I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground." Notice those words, "I was afraid." Behind his outward inactivity was fear. And isn't that familiar to all of us? How many times do we know that we need to take the next step, yet tell ourselves, "I'm not ready yet"? How many times do we walk away from an opportunity because we are afraid that it will not work out? How many times do we refuse to begin because we are worried about what other people will say? Sometimes fear does not come to us in an obvious form. It does not say, "Give up on your calling." Instead, it speaks much more gently, "Wait a little longer." It says, "First, become better. First, learn more. First, make more money. First, wait for the right time. First, stop being afraid." And the person waits. A year passes, then another, then 5 more. And one day, that person realizes that their entire life has become a waiting room for a moment that never came. And that is why one thought from this parable is so important. God did not require the third servant to produce what had been given to the first. He was not expected to bring back 5 additional talents. He had been given one, and it was that one talent for which he was accountable. This is extremely important to understand because so many people live their lives comparing themselves with others. We look at other people and think that we are not successful enough, not talented enough, not spiritual enough, not influential enough. We compare our lives with someone else's life, and because of that, we stop seeing our own path. But God did not tell you to live someone else's life. He did not entrust you with someone else's abilities. He will not ask you why you are not like somebody else. He will ask you about what was entrusted to you. Maybe you really have been given very little. But does something small become meaningless simply because it is smaller than what someone else received? One talent was still a talent. One opportunity was still an opportunity. One person you can help still matters. One family you can serve still matters. One ability you can use for good still matters. We often think that in order to change something around us, we first need to receive a great deal. But God may choose to begin with something small. And here, another important question arises. Why was the talent given to the servant in the first place? Because it was entrusted to him. The word entrusted means that it was not merely his possession. It was also a responsibility. Everything we have is ultimately a gift. Our time, our life, our abilities, the people around us, the opportunities that come our way. None of these things belong to us forever. We may have them today, but we cannot guarantee that tomorrow will be the same. That is why the question of the parable goes deeper than simply asking, "Are you successful?" The question is, have you been faithful with what was entrusted to you? And that completely changes our understanding of success. Because in the eyes of the world, success often belongs to the person who received the most. But in Jesus' parable, the praise goes not simply to the one who was given more, but to the one who was faithful. The first servant produced 10 talents. The second produced 4. Yet the master says essentially the same thing to both of them. Well done, good and faithful servant. Why? Because the value of a person is not measured by comparing their results with someone else's. God looks at faithfulness, and that is freeing. You do not have to become the most famous person. You do not have to accomplish more than everyone else. You do not have to prove to the entire world that your life has value. You need to be faithful with what God has already placed in your hands. But then, an uncomfortable question arises. What if we discover that our talent really has been buried? What if we realize that we have known for a long time what we should do, but we keep putting it off? What if the reason is not a lack of opportunity, but fear? Then this parable becomes more than a story about someone who lived long ago. It becomes a mirror. And perhaps that is why it creates such tension within us. Because it is easier to blame our circumstances than to admit our fear. It is easier to say, "I never had an opportunity," than to honestly ask, "Did I use the opportunity I actually had?" It is easier to say, "I wasn't given enough," than to admit, "I did not even use what I was given." But God does not compare you with the person who received 5 talents. He looks at your one, and there is hope in that. Because if today you realize that something in your life has been buried, that does not mean everything is lost. As long as a person is alive, there is still an opportunity to take the next step. You can stop comparing yourself. You can stop waiting for perfect circumstances. You can stop allowing fear to make your decisions for you. You can dig up what you once buried and finally put it to use. Perhaps the first step will be small. Perhaps no one will even notice it. But it will be real. And perhaps that is where a new chapter of your life will begin. So today, ask yourself a few questions. What has God already entrusted to me? What abilities has He given me? What people has He placed around me? What opportunities have I already had but walked away from because of fear? What am I still putting off? And perhaps the most important question of all, is my talent buried in the ground right now? We do not know how much time we have left. That is why life cannot be postponed forever. One day, the opportunity will end, and the time to give an account will come. And then the question will not be how many talents each of us received. The question will be something else. What did we do with what we were given? Maybe you were given 5 talents, maybe 2, maybe only 1. But if that one was given to you by God, then it already matters. Do not compare it with someone else's 5. Do not despise it. Do not hide it. And do not allow fear to convince you that it is better to do nothing than to take a risk and fail. Because sometimes the greatest tragedy in a person's life is not that they tried and failed. It is that they never tried at all. They carried something within them that could have produced fruit. But one day, they realized that they had simply buried it in the ground. So if there is something in your heart today that God once entrusted to you, do not postpone it for another day. Take the first step. Let it be small. Let it be frightening. Let yourself still feel unprepared. But begin. Because perhaps one day you will realize that God was never asking you for an extraordinary result. He was asking for your faithfulness. And when the time comes to stand before Him, what will matter most will not be how great your talent appeared in the eyes of other people. What will matter most is what you did with what He entrusted to you. And perhaps today is the very day when it is time to stop burying your life.